of the Successors of Malcolm X series. My name is Tanzeen Doha, and I'm going to simply start off this roundtable, and then Hannibal Shakur is going to moderate today's conversation. We have a very special guest with us today, Brother Amir Abdul Malik Ali, who's the Amir of Oakland Islamic Community Center. And we also have Abdul Rahman Shakur, and they're going to be mainly dealing with the questions related to today's figure that we're going to deal with. We're going to talk about H. Rap Brown, who's an instrumental figure of all the way back from civil rights movement to the Black Power movement, to the Black Liberation Army, and to the Islamic struggle. So today, however, we have two-part series with Imam Jamil Al-Amin. The first part is today, which is going to focus on his earlier history of activism and organizing. So we're going to call that section H. Rap Brown. And then next week, we're going to be talking about his Islamic transformation and what that means. So inshallah, so at this point, I'm going to have Hannibal get started with the conversation, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum to the believers. And welcome to all of our guests that are viewing with us. It's always exciting to be in conversation with Brother Amir Abdul Malik. So I'm really excited about that. And, it's always interesting as well how things unfold in time. And I was actually just recently listening to one of Imam Jamil's interviews, or I don't know if it was an interview or a talk he was giving, but he was talking about time, and how things unfold in divine time. And, we had kind of worked out a schedule for this series, and we made a lot of adjustments along the way. And it just so happened that we're talking about Imam Jamil right now, and in the midst of organizers gearing up for a national action to try to get him out of that dungeon. So inshallah, this is a timely conversation. So assalamu alaikum, Brother Amir.
Wa alaikum salam wa brother.
I'm going to ask you our first question, which is, how and when did H. Rap Brown's activism begin? Can you explain his transition from civil rights to Black Power?
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. H. Rap Brown, Hubert G. Brown, was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And he had eventually gone to Southern University, which is a HBCU. He was an athlete, basketball and football. And I'm throwing that out there because for later on, when we deal with some of his involvement in the revolt of the Black athlete. One of the things he talked about was that one of the things that politicized him was that when he would see LSU and how beautiful that campus was, he would juxtapose it to the conditions of the campus on Southern. So when he saw that type of segregation, he said that that politicized him, further politicized him. He said that the message that was being given was "Die, nigga, die," which, as we know, was the title of his book he did in 1969. And so with that, of course, he saw the contradictions there. His brother, Ed Brown, is someone who he really looked up to. And Ed Brown was in Washington, D.C., and Ed Brown was going to Howard University. And Ed Brown suggested that his little brother, right, little brother, 6'5", right, his little brother come up to D.C. and get involved up there. And so he did. So H-Rap goes up to D.C. and he gets involved in a group that his brother is very much involved in, NAG, the nonviolent action group, NAG. NAG has some affiliations with SNCC in the South. And so so H-Rap goes up to DC, he gets involved in NAG, and then he gets involved in the local politics in Washington, D.C. So he ends up becoming the head of NAG. And interestingly enough, I wanted to share this with you too, because he ends up becoming a part of the Department of Agriculture. He has a little position in the Department of Agriculture, and he becomes a part of. He worked as a neighborhood worker in an anti-poverty program. This was in 1964, 65. It was at that time, and with that particular group, they went to the White House and they talked to Lyndon Johnson about poverty and so on and so forth.
Wow.
Then he goes south and he gets directly involved with SNCC. And as he's directly involved with SNCC, so all the stories that we read about in terms of Freedom Summer in 1964, he was there in Mississippi for Freedom Summer. We hear about Loudoun County in Alabama. HRAP was sent to Alabama. He was in charge of organizing voter registration, the whole nine, in Alabama. He was sent there by Stokely Carmichael. Stokely, later, of course, Kwame Ture. Stokely was the president of SNCC at the time. This is in 1966. So actually, HRAP Brown was in charge. He was in charge of all the activities in Alabama. He was in charge of it. And so he was there. And when they went to Atlantic City for the Democratic Convention, and Sister Fannie Lou Hamer gave her famous talk, he was there. So from NAG, he gets heavily involved in SNCC, and now he's in the South. And he's really working in the South. I mean, really working, organizing and so on and so forth. And their position, SNCC's position, there's a classic work on SNCC that everyone should read. It's called In Struggle, done by Claiborne Carson. It's a classic work on SNCC. And so what SNCC understood was that even though there were those who didn't agree with focusing on voter registration and all that type of thing, one of the things they talked about was that using different vehicles to get people to take people to another level of activism, right? For him, and so their goal was to get these old Black folks, right, politicize them, get them involved, get them active, as well as the youth as well, and to help them go to another level of activism. So that's what he was involved in. Now, of course, we know that in 1966, then Stokely Carmichael, Chairman Stokely Carmichael, calls for Black Power. And in the call for Black Power, which of course was just nothing but Black self-determination, they told the white students that, they weren't needed anymore. SNCC takes a major turn towards Black self-determination. Many of those white students went back up north and joined the anti-war movement, having learned their skills, organizing skills from SNCC in the South. So SNCC takes a Black determination turn in a form of Black Power. And then they also got away from nonviolence as a principle. Nonviolence as a principle. And in doing so, they began to go in the direction of armed self-defense. In 1966. Stokely Carmichael, the chairmanship of SNCC was only for a year. And so in 1967, Stokely Carmichael announces the new chairman of SNCC, and that would be HRAP Brown. And Stokely Carmichael had said, "You think I was something? Wait till you see this next brother who's coming." And so HRAP Brown becomes the chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, right? With a focus on Black self-determination, with a focus on armed self-defense. And so HRAP Brown, when we talk about how for the first time in this country, late 60s and early 70s, young Black males all across the country, coast to coast, in the middle of the country, were picking up guns and turning those guns on the system. The face of that were three people: Huey, Bobby, and H. Rap Brown. And more so, in a sense, at this time, H. Rap Brown, because by this time Huey and Bobby are under like serious persecution, right? Huey goes in 1967, comes out in 1970. By the early 70s, Bobby is like, they got Bobby like tied up in a chair in a courtroom with a gag on him and so on and so forth. H. Rap Brown was going through his thing, but Huey and Bobby, they had, the persecution for them started right at 1966. You know what I'm saying? With the formation of the Black Panther Party. And so, in a sense, H. Rap Brown was like the face of this whole move towards picking up guns and on the system, and pointing them to the system. So he was really the face of it, and the system responded in that way.
You know what I'm saying? We talked in earlier episodes about some of the things that Malcolm.
I can't hear you. You went out. I can't hear.
Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I got you now, but you went out. Start over again, please, brother.
Okay, sure. So we were talking in earlier episodes about how, Malcolm, one of the things that he was working on towards the end of his life was, working with younger people and having them get involved with civil rights work, but to make it more serious and more intelligent and advance it politically, et cetera, and make it more militant. And so it's interesting thinking about H. Rap Brown's life, because he, having been so involved with the civil rights movement,
right,
to be as you say, like the face of this kind of militancy, it's it represents something very significant historically.
Yeah, I agree. The youth really, and see, Malcolm basically was telling us, I think, that if y'all gonna play this electoral game, then do it from a perspective of an independent people. Do it with an independent mindset. That's what he was like coming from, right? I think, and so when we analyze where Malcolm was coming from, that's the essence of it was. Here's how an independent-minded people would engage in this particular type of process, right? Register as independents and so on and so forth, right? And so yeah, it was really a change, like Nonviolent Action Group to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and now the change, the turn, the emphasis on Black self-determination, Black power, armed self-defense, and so on and so forth. That was a huge change. It was a huge change, and keep in mind, brothers were responding to COINTELPRO. They was shooting us down. They was like, for example, the Panthers started in like 1966. By 1960s, I'd say 8, in terms of the actual assassinations and so on and so forth, that's when things started, like they started taking Panthers out. You know what I'm saying? And so this is another thing I think the brothers were responding to. Here we are trying to obtain basic human rights, and they're coming at us with serious force. And so brothers were talking about, like, no, we got to defend ourselves. Keep in mind, in the South, in the last major march in the South, the brothers went to Dr. King. The Deacons for Defense went to Dr. King and said, Dr. King, like, we're armed. We're gonna arm ourselves to protect the marchers. We're walking through Klan country. We're walking through boom, boom. So we're gonna protect the marchers. And Dr. King said, okay. He said, okay. Like, he didn't say, well, whoa, no, that goes against our nonviolent philosophy. He didn't get into all that. People don't recognize the fact that he said, okay. You know what I'm saying? And so that was Martin and Malcolm. That was Martin and Malcolm's, thing. And so you had a situation where these brothers were saying that nonviolence can be a tactic, but it's not a principle. It's not a principle. You know what I'm saying? And that's what Stokely was talking about with Dr. King. Stokely and Dr. King were personally very close. And so he would get with Dr. King on that topic. You know what I'm saying? That it's not a principle. It can be a tactic, but it's not a principle. So this whole aspect of having armed brothers who would protect the marchers, who would protect the movement, that's what the Deacons for Defense were all about. You know what I'm saying? You had brothers who were armed who were protecting the movement, who were protecting the marchers. But whatever strategy they chose to do, all right, choose that strategy. We're going to be here to protect you, to make sure that you're able to follow through with that strategy. That's what was going on. You know what I'm saying? That's what was going on, but not really talked about, And one of the books that I think we talked about before, they said without that component, the movement wouldn't have gone anywhere without that component. Even down to, okay, we have to protect these brothers and sisters who are helping people register to vote. Okay, cool. That's what y'all doing? Okay, cool. We're gonna protect y'all doing that. So if y'all,
Let me ask you this, Brother Amir.
Yeah.
So one could look at that history and say, like what you're saying about the Deacons for Defense, and say, well, this is an intelligent response to what they're faced with. Right. And for me, when I was, like growing up, I was, taught about this history of like SNCC and the Panthers, et cetera. And one of the things that was taught to me about SNCC was that they sort of had this effect of, bringing a sort of intelligent approach to things that people were already doing. And in speeches, H. Brown, Imam Jamil, in one of his speeches, he talked about education and training. How, you don't need to bring, one of the things he was saying is, you don't need to bring a program into the community because, there's already programs, but you need to bring a direction, and you need to bring an intelligent approach, basically. He said ideology, but at the time, in the context of the speech, he was talking about the difference between sort of just going through the motions like a robot, kind of, and just doing whatever the steps, and then and the difference of thinking intelligently about how you approach what you're doing, what your goals are, etc. Can you tell us a little bit about, how he brought that element to the struggle and to the movement in terms of his role in SNCC?
Well, SNCC had that. He added to it. You know what I'm saying? He added to it. SNCC has some very dynamic brothers and sisters, very dynamic, which is why Ella Baker suggested that they stay independent. After the 4 students did their thing in North Carolina, it spread like wildfire. And so it culminated in the meeting that all these students had from the South. And Dr. King was at that meeting. I'm sure you guys know that story. And he was suggesting that they become an arm of SCLC. Ella Baker was there. And Ella Baker suggested that they stay independent, right? And so they went with Ella. And so Ella Baker, Fundi as they called her, Ella Baker became like she was like the matriarch for SNCC. And so from that moment on, SNCC was the student wing of the Southern Freedom Movement, the so-called Civil Rights Movement. They were the student wing. And the things that they did, one of the things that they emphasized, which I really respected, was that, as you alluded to just now, they would go into a place and they would develop the leadership that was already there. And they would encourage that those leaders take the leadership role in that particular movement. So they were there to help educate, as you said. They were there to help give the broader picture. They were there to help the people engage with the system. And I'll say it again, from an independent mentality. You know what I'm saying? But their focus was on developing local leadership. We're not coming here to save you type thing, right? We're coming here to help. You know what I'm saying? We'll help give some insight. We'll help give, that type of thing. But the thing was local leadership. That's why Sister Fannie Lou Hamer came up. You know what I'm saying? Their focus was on developing local leadership. And I thought that was really important. You know what I'm saying? It showed that they weren't coming with an arrogant attitude. You know what I'm saying? They were definitely trying to engage the system from a perspective of independence. They were also connecting the struggles to a larger struggle in the country, and eventually the larger struggle internationally. You know what I'm saying? That an education thing, right? And so they had it down. And I thought it was also interesting too how when SNCC would go in there, they would tell the other students who were coming, look, don't be cursing, don't be, because they're dealing with old Black folks from the South. This is the Bible Belt, right? So basically they were saying your character, you better make sure your character is tight. Yeah. Because if your character is not right, you're going to turn the people off, because these old religious Black folks are going to look at character. They're going to look at character. So SNCC was dealing with all that. They were dealing with all that, you know what I'm saying? And so, but the ideas that they had, the ideas and the strategies they had, it was just that. Let's educate the people. Let's help take them to another level of their activism. The people themselves are the leaders.
Sorry, brother. I mean, we're having a little bit of connection issues, so we're lagging a little bit.
No problem.
But yeah, this is all really interesting, and it kind of says a lot about the way the struggle kind of unfolds in terms of looking at the influences over that period of time. And that sort of transition from civil rights into Black power. A lot of times. Yeah. A lot of times historically it's presented as like one or the other. One thing I appreciate about you is that you always break down the details and a lot of the nuanced details involved, and how a lot of that stuff was totally intermingled, but it was sort of this evolution over time, and it became more prominent as the struggle matured and grew up, if you will.
Yeah, it's a natural evolution. Mm-hmm. It's a natural evolution. You know what I'm saying? Like Black self-determination, that was a natural response to what any people, self-determination is a human right. It's a human right. And so, of course, our people were brought over here and enslaved, and that retarded our development in terms of self-determination. But of course, when we talk about freedom, one of the main themes is going to be self-determination, Black self-determination. That's going to be the main theme, whether we call it Black power, whatever we call it, that's going to be the main theme. So it's a natural outgrowth. So when people see, and they say that SNCC, they forbade white people to be involved, and they're not talking about it from the standpoint of Black self-determination. You know what I'm saying? It's like we have to do this ourselves. Now, white folks want to help; they can help in their own way, but on the ground, day to day, we've got to do this ourselves. Because if white people are helping us, that just feeds into our inferiority complex. That's just basic, right? And so we have to do this ourselves. So it was a natural extension. It was a natural progression. You know what I'm saying? That now we have to focus particularly on Black self-determination. You got to do that, because the thing was, of course, integration and so on and so forth, separate but equal. And there was a turn when they said separate but equal. There are many of us who should have said, there are many of us who feel that the strategy should have been, don't put focus on the fact that it's separate, put focus on the fact that it's not equal.
Right.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Forget the separation. We'll deal with the separation. Separation means our own institutions. You know what I'm saying? And so let's talk about the fact it's not equal. And if you white folks do not want us coming to your schools, we could threaten them with integration. You know what I'm saying? We could threaten them with it. If you don't want us coming to your schools, then you should advocate us having schools of equal quality to yours.
Yeah.
And if we have schools of equal quality to yours, you ain't got to worry about us wanting to come to your schools.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Now, of course, the problem with that is that white folks do not want us to have self-determination. You know what I'm saying? So you're angry at us because we want to come to your schools because they're better quality, but you do not want to help advocate us having the same quality as your schools because it has to do with Black self-determination. So they're stuck in their hate. They're stuck in their hate. You know what I'm saying? But the problem was not separation. The problem was it wasn't equal. That was the problem. And so some of our people who had an inferiority complex, they went for the thing with the separation part. They focus on the separation part. We need to be with you in order for us to be better. We need to be with you, that kind of thing, right? No. Separation is cool. Matter of fact, when we get separate and we have equal institutions, we're going to beat your children away from us.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to be like us. They want to be like us. They want to hang out with us. We got to beat y'all away. You know what I'm saying? And so that strategy, go ahead, man.
Tulsa, as you're talking, that was I've heard someone say that one of the things that instigated that riot in Tulsa was the fact that they had Black banks that were giving loans to poor white people. Yes. And some white people got hip to the fact that, like these Black people are actually empowering poor white people.
Yes.
That's dangerous because that represents so much power. And it represents a whole flip to the whole scenario.
Serious power. Because our self-determination, if we're in tune with who we are, our self-determination is going to also usher in alternative institutions. We're not going to do it like they do it. That cutthroat capitalist, you know what I'm saying? We're not going to do it like they do it. It's going to be an alternative. And it'll be an alternative that other people will be able to respond to, will be able to relate to. Because you know how we are as Black people. We influence people from all racial spectrums, right? So when we're coming with different types of institutions, right? And because of influence that we already have, oh my goodness, you know what I'm saying? So that mindset, it's a major example. And so the powers that be find that extremely threatening. Yeah. So here's these poor Black folks who are going to these Black banks, you know what I'm saying, for loans and stuff. And I would imagine that those Black folks who are running those institutions were not the type of Black folks who would foreclose on someone.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to take your farm from you. You know what I'm saying? We're going to take possession of, you know what I'm saying? I would imagine they were coming from a different place.
Right. Well,
just a different place, because as Black people, we respond to certain things. You know what I'm saying?
Whenever we talk about this stuff, I always relate it back to the Spanish Inquisition in terms of the influence that the Moors were having, because we're talking about the beginning of the Crusades and when Black and white started to become a thing. And one of the things that was a big part of that history was the way that land was being dealt with. Yes. So when the Moors would take land, they would actually lease the land out to poor people, and that would allow them to actually make a profit off of their labor instead of just paying them a low wage or just taking and leaving them a portion of the crop that they farmed, etc.
Yes.
Land totally different than the monarchy did in the church and the noble blood families, whatever.
Yes. The way. I'm sorry. Go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I got a point I wanted to allude to, but I want to hear what you're going to say.
No, because the nature of the Sharia, it is designed not to keep people in poverty and impoverished. The nature of the Sharia is to help people live a life of dignity. Because every Allah says in Quran that the son of Adam was given a dignity. There's nobility that the son of Adam was given, the human being. So a human being has a part of them, a nobility, a respect. So in dealing with all human beings, they have to be given the opportunity to live in a state of dignity and self-respect. So the scenario that you just mentioned does that. It makes sure they have that self-respect. So I just wanted to highlight that, inshallah. Go ahead. I'm sorry though.
Yeah, and I mean that's a very important point, and it's dangerous for people who want to oppress when there's a better alternative to their system.
Yes, yes,
you know.
yes, exactly.
And so there's something you alluded to earlier, and I want to ask this question to Brother Abdurrahman, because one of the things you talked about is how they would kind of how SNCC would kind of school some young people working in the South about cursing and certain etiquettes in order to have the best reception in the community.
Yes.
And so I got a question for Abdurrahman, which kind of to that point, which is what qualities did H. Brown illustrate prior to his Shahada that are compatible to Islam?
So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I feel like, well, you really don't have to go too far into like, the book that we assigned us, the reading Die Nigga Die, to find like a lot of different things if you're even semi-aware with some of Imam Jamil's speeches. So like, for example, just in the first chapter, right? There's definitely, he discusses, I feel like, when he talks about King Herod and like every new black birth is a political one, right? Because the state and the system is against black people gaining numbers and power, right? So that directly correlates to what we see later through what the FBI put out with Prevent the Rise of a Black Messiah, right? So we can see very clearly his analysis of how the system deals with trying to prevent or stop the rise of the rebellion within the oppressed community, and how own childhood education. So the way in which he was trained to value white society, or just how Black America in general is trained to value white society over their own. You can definitely see like he had a sharp analysis in regards to spirituality even prior to becoming. And then later, this very same, I actually took some quotes in this very same chapter. You see actually at the beginning of the book, and he uses this quote in some of his later speeches as a Muslim, how he talks about racism systematically verifies itself when the slave can only become free by imitating his master. And so he uses that quote in this book. So, me not, I guess, having enough of a memory to remember when I read this book a while ago, I understand that he constantly makes this reference now as a Muslim, but to know that he used it in the quote in his book shows that he's probably been reflecting on these ideas and issues for a while. And so he talks about the three types of America, right? White America, Negro America, and Black America. And he also relates this to Fanon's analysis of like the token captive leaders and the peasants and the colony. And he talks about the difference in aspirations and how white America wants to keep Negro America and Black America oppressed, right? Repressed beneath it. Negro America, he talks about, aspires to be like white America, but to the point that they don't upset white America. And that Black America just wants to be free. And Negro America takes it as their duty to quell the rebellion of Black America to keep white America on their side. And he talks about how people aspire to whiteness, or aspire even within the Negro America, they aspire to whiteness, even knowing that they'll never be able to accomplish this. So he talks about how I feel like this points out his analysis of knowing that you'll never be free by imitating your master. So outside of Islam, while you're fighting for Islam, it's not going to end up with the final product of what you're struggling.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You see, if you're trying to be like the person that you're fighting against, you'll never be free, because you're essentially just going to try to be what you don't like, and you'll never attain it because of the very existence of the contradiction between the two. You'll never attain that. So even if you feel like you're a good job at being better at being a white American than white America, you'll still never be considered a white American. So the fact that he points this out, I feel like is a clear indication that a lot of his qualities were very compatible with Islam. And looking back on it, it makes me realize like how much this makes sense, and like alhamdulillah, best black. I first started reading Imam Jamil or H. Rap Brown is when, prior to me becoming a Muslim, and all of the stuff that I would take from it was secular in it, my understanding.
Right.
And not even, I mean, I knew he was a Muslim at that point when looking back on it, but I didn't see how the dots connected and how it makes so much sense of things that he used to talk about and is still talking away Islamically, though.
It's interesting, brother, because when he talked about his eventual transition to Islam, he said, quote, "It was a continuation of a lifestyle." And so I'm sure us, we can relate to that, you know what I'm saying? Because being in the movement, being in the struggle, we could ask that question of each other. You know what I'm saying? That there were certain things we were doing when we were quote unquote Black nationalists, whatever, secular, whatever the case may be, that was consistent to Islam.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so we can really relate to where he's coming from on that. You know what I'm saying? It's just interesting that, and it's a beautiful thing that what he was saying and what we were saying was that we wanted to address our spiritual side. And that's huge. That's huge. Because for a lot of times it was, the quote unquote militants, there was an emphasis on the militancy and the secularism, but you had brothers who were saying, no, we got to have that spiritual side together. And that was just a blessing. That was a blessing, you know what I'm saying? And so yeah, it was a continuation of a lifestyle.
Brother,
you know
we missed a little bit of your last 30 seconds. So if you don't
I thought it was a freeze, but yeah, only that was a continuation of a lifestyle.
Yeah.
The fact that we as quote unquote Black militants came to an understanding that we need spirituality. You know what I'm saying? That this was H. Rap Brown who was saying, I need spirituality. You know what I'm saying? And in the North, there wasn't a religious tradition in the North that would contain the militancy. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't going to be Christianity. Christianity could contain the militancy in the South. But in terms of the North, something else was needed to contain the militancy of the Northern Black folks. You know what I'm saying? And Christianity wasn't that tradition, right? By Malcolm dealing with what he dealt with, now this gives us an alternative now. Now we can still have our militancy without getting rid of our spirituality. Islam. You know what I'm saying? And Malcolm had a lot to do with that, giving us that alternative. Because we still want to be spiritual. We're an African people. We still want to be spiritual. We have to be spiritual. You know what I'm saying? To get rid of it, now we're really European. You know what I'm saying? Fighting against the Europeans. You know what I'm saying? So it's like so yeah.
When you're saying that, and even earlier, like when you were mentioning about going into how they were training people to go into the community in a particular way, and
yes,
these are things that there's certain elements. And
hold on. You said these are things that are certain elements, and then you froze. Go back.
These there's certain elements on the left, if you will,
Yeah.
or you know, in you know, activism, etc.
Right. Right.
That now they really frown upon these things,
Right.
in
Yeah.
terms of spirituality, in terms
Yeah.
of having a certain way of engaging in the community,
Yeah.
etc.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but it seems like in those times, it seems like there was a lot more or a lot closer connection. And today it seems like you on the one hand you got activists who are sort of mostly atheists, I don't know, or some
Right. Right. Right.
kind of thing, but not
Right.
spiritual politics. There's no connection between their politics and spirituality, if you will.
Right. Right.
And then on the other hand, you have Muslims who are sort of just avoiding politics or avoiding dealing with certain kinds of politics. How did that happen? And I mean, I know that's kind of like a big, broad question, but it's something that
Yes.
is
Exactly.
scratching in the back
Exactly.
of my head.
The siyasa.
Conversation.
Yeah. Politics is governance. Politics is governance. So when people say don't be political, what they're saying is don't deal with issues of governance. And so people who are more inclined towards Black self-determination or self-determination in general, they're going to deal with politics because self-determination is all about governance. It's all about self-governance. You know what I'm saying? And so governance, the whole aspect of an independent people are going to deal with governance, self-governance. They're going to critique other forms of governance. They're going to critique it. You know what I'm saying? We're Muslims. We're builders of civilizations. You darn right we're going to critique other civilizations. You know what I'm saying? Because it has to do with governance. So I think it comes from that tendency, inferiority complex or fear. You know what I'm saying? Because once you start talking about governance, the enemy don't want to hear that. He don't want to hear you talking about governance. Mm-hmm. For Muslims, you could talk about nikah, you could talk about Eids, you could talk about janazas, but don't talk about Islamic economics and the political system of Islam. Don't you dare go there because that has to do with self-governance. You know what I'm saying? And so people who are free, we're going to deal with governance, self-governance and other people's governance. We're going to deal with that. Right. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's really, really, really critical.
Sure. Okay. We had kind of some lined up questions, but I'm also been throwing a lot in there too, because just some of the stuff you're saying, it brings a lot to mind. I want to ask Brother Abdul Rahman another question. And please jump in too, along with him, inshallah.
Inshallah.
What effect did the merger of SNCC and the Black Panther Party have on the Black Liberation Movement? And what role did H. Rap Brown play in this?
I think that the merger of SNCC and the Black Panther Party kind of like synthesized different tactics and methods within the Black liberation struggle at that point. So it took and to be honest, I think it also synthesized a lot of similarities geographically too. So oftentimes we think of, at least in regards of militancy, we think of the North, as kind of having more militancy, and the South kind of being a little bit less militant. And for a long time, that's been my analysis of history, but I've kind of, as of late, started to learn more about some of the clandestine and quiet, armed and militant organizing from people in the South, and how I feel, and I bring that up to say that I feel like the merger of the Black Panther Party and SNCC was an attempt to Black freedom movement. And he talks about how even though the official position of different nonviolent organizations was to be nonviolent, the actual practice of particularly the local people who were from the South, the area in which they were organizing was to make sure that there was self-defense mechanisms always at the ready. And so I feel like the merger was able to like kind of dispel some of the myths, as well as introduce some different organizing techniques to people whose geographic conditions may have like dictated they organized differently. So like in the North, we're known for the militancy, at least above ground, right? Public organizing is known for pushing the limits because this is the epicenter where they claim to be, you know, equal and progressive. In the South, the contradiction was very clear. It's like, we don't even want you to look at our women or walk on the same side of the street. And so the organizing had to be a little different, but the spirit was essentially the same because even during some of the boycotts, you know, that's seen as like a relatively non-violent action, there was armed resistance going on from internal community discipline that violated the boycott to actual armed protection of people who were organizing these boycotts and, you know, military responses to actual attacks from the Klan and the state. And so I feel like this brought a merger to the different perspectives of how to go about the same goal. And of course, we know H. Rap Brown was drafted into the Black Panther Party during the Minister of Justice of the Black Panther Party. And during this time, right, shortly after that, I do know that political oppression intensified extremely. This was
I
like,
made a payment. If you look, you'll see that a payment has been made of $33.58.
it threatened the state. SNCC having a lot longer history of organizing, more veteran activists, and the Black Panther Party having a lot more younger, I guess you could say, energetic, fresh, new organizing, brought together different elements within the Black community that the state extremely feared. So I feel like this is what the merger did, and the role that he played in that was extremely important in bringing like a lot of what is known as like Northern militancy, being that he was from the South, and bringing this perspective to the Black liberation movement, I think was important.
And it's worthy to note that the Panthers Minister of Justice ends up becoming an imam.
Right.
Yeah. It really is. It really is. It really is. And when you look at it, like brother was saying, this was the preeminent youth organization in the Southern Freedom Movement, who hook up with the preeminent youth organization in the Northern Freedom Movement in Oakland. You know what I'm saying? So extremely powerful. And the other point that was raised, when those brothers protected the movement, I think we have to understand too that not only were them protecting of the movement, it's connected to the broader picture that whatever we build in this country in terms of Black self-determination, we have to have people to protect it. Right. We can't have no more bombs on Black Wall Street and so on and so forth. You know what I'm saying? It's like we have to have people who will protect it. If they try to come at us through the courts, we have to have people to protect it in that angle. If they try to come at us militaristically, we have to have people willing to die to protect it from that angle. So when we had people who were protecting the marchers and stuff, that's connected to the larger picture of that we have to have a group always ready to protect whatever we build, right? Because regentrification, that's an attack on Black self-determination.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's all it is.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And so that's connected to the larger picture of any type of attempts we move towards the Black self-determination. We have to have our own institutions of protection to make sure that they're not infringed upon. The other point I think is important to make, Brother Abdurrahman said, that's really, really critical. When we have an either or type analysis, it puts us in a European frame of mind, because usually the European frame of mind will do something is either or, and then those either or are in conflict with each other.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So now we have to be in conflict with the Hoteps. We have to be in conflict with the, you know what I'm saying? And the whole aspect of conflict is a European construct. You know what I'm saying? That we have to have this thing, both. You know what I'm saying? Southern Freedom Movement and the Northern Freedom Movement. You know what I'm saying? Malcolm and Martin. You know what I'm saying? It's like we have to have this both. When H. Rap Brown said in his book, Die Nigga Die, that I'm paraphrasing here, he said that usually the revolt is a result of, you know, police brutality, right? But the black youth are upset over, now check out what he named. He said they're upset over racial, you know, police brutality, you know, racism, and economic injustice.
Mhm.
He mentioned both of those, you know, and usually there's this whole thing, race or class. It's a race issue. No, it's a
Right.
class issue,
Right.
and we gotta fight over that.
Right.
No, it's both. It's both. You know what I'm saying? And so that whole analysis of getting back to both, not either or, and these both work in harmony with each other, that puts us back more in the Islamic frame, and it puts us more back in the African frame. And we have to, I think, share that with some of the other brothers and sisters out there who are doing this either or thing. And now, as a result of either or, there's got to be conflict.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? What the Southern Freedom Movement gave us was critical. It was critical. As Abdul Rahman said that, yeah, this is serious, right? What they gave us was critical. It was based on spirituality. It was based on spirituality. The base was the church. You know what I'm saying? And all that implies, you know what I'm saying? And so there's the Black Power came out of the call for Black Power came out of the South. This call for Black self-determination, that came out of the South.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The whole aspect of armed self-defense, that's a Southern tradition.
Yeah.
You're 12 years old in the South, you got your own gun. You know what I'm saying? Because, you know, so those type of things did come out of the South, did come out of the Southern Freedom Movement. And so that's why it's so important for us to have that both mentality. It's both.
And I think just to add real quick to that, I think that with the question, the merger of these two organizations is like an illustration of the epitome of what the Amir talked about with the race and class issue. Like,
Right.
So you look at the South and you ask the average elder who's from the South, what was the major issue for you growing up in society? They'll say, you know, racism or the racist white folks. You may have
segregation.
North who grows up right around nothing but other Black and brown people. They'll say the institutions, the conditions, the quote unquote class. But the fact that both of these contradictions exist and the merger of these two organizations, and more specifically the articulation of these issues by Imam Jamil, or at that time H. Rap Brown, I think is extremely important because he breaks down like how they feed into each other, race and class, but why it's important not to put one above the other, but to understand that it's both. And I feel like these two organizations kind of epitomized the synthesis of that analysis.
Yeah, I agree.
Race,
I agree.
South, you know, white folk not even let you look him in the eye, and you know, in the North, class, the fact that you may have someone who looks like you hoarding all the resources from you, and they're eating good while your children starve. You know, so
straight up.
These perspectives need to be understood, and Imam Jamil or H. Rap Brown and this merger, I feel like, pointed that out.
Yeah, I agree. The Black liberation struggle teaches us so much. It teaches us so much, and we have to be willing to open up to it, because the Black liberation struggle will help us understand many ayats from the Quran. You know what I'm saying? It'll help us understand many hadith. It'll help us to understand the seerah of the Prophet, peace be upon him, on a much deeper level, because we're involved in a struggle. We're involved in it. You know what I'm saying? And so it'll give us an insight into Islam, the Quran, the Sunnah, and the seerah that people who are fluent in Arabic don't even have. Seriously, because of the component of struggle, So there's certain things that we can identify with in many of those ayats on a personal level, many of those hadith on a personal level, many of the seerah on a personal level. We can identify with it because of the struggle.
Yeah, I mean, when you're faced with the odds that we're dealing with and the obstacles that we're dealing with, and you're reaching for something that's
Right.
gonna get you through this struggle that you have to face,
Right.
most things just look flimsy in
Right.
comparison.
Right.
You know,
Right.
most things that you might turn to are not going to get you through the day, let alone
Right. Exactly.
through the struggle.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and,
Exactly.
and alhamdulillah for Islam, because
Alhamdulillah.
we find these things in our tradition that you can be in such a dire situation,
Alhamdulillah.
think,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it can actually, instead of breaking you, it can bring out something more beautiful from you.
Yeah. Can I say something else too about H. Rap Brown? People have a tendency not to realize what he was really involved in, what he was really connected to, his influence at that time. When Stokely Carmichael, these brothers had so much pressure on them. Everybody was looking for another Malcolm. And Stokely was literally looked at as the next Malcolm when Stokely was 25. That's a lot, man.
Yeah.
H. Rap Brown became the chairman of SNCC at 23. Now, when Stokely left SNCC, and Stokely was the face, all right. When Stokely left SNCC, Stokely went out the country. Two reasons: he was building an international base, and two, he married Miriam Makeba. Miriam Makeba was a very famous singer from South Africa. So by him marrying Miriam Makeba, he would go on the road with her. I mean, she was a major figure, figure. So he'd go on the road with her, so on and so forth. So he's building a base in Africa. He's on the road with his wife a lot. Stokely was out of the country at major times in the late 60s and early 70s. He'd come back and forth. So Stokely, because he was gone so much, he stopped becoming the face of it, right? The face of it became H. Rap Brown. He became the face of it. So now H. Rap Brown got involved in the revolt of the Black athlete, Tommy Smith, John Carlos, when Dr. Harry Edwards was calling different people to support the Black athlete boycott. The reason why the Black youth supported it was because of H. Rap Brown. H. Rap Brown signed on to it. Now let me go back to what I said earlier. H. Rap Brown got a scholarship, a football scholarship to Southern University. So he was an athlete who sacrificed his whole athletic thing for the movement. So H. Rap Brown was also a part of the revolt of the Black athlete. You know what I'm saying? Very critical, I think. So the other thing, of course, when we talked about him literally jamming up James Brown, and James Brown came up with "Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud." H. Rap Brown jammed him up hard, and he came up with that. The movie showed that. The movie talked about that. Get On Up. The movie Detroit, when they killed those brothers, they assassinated those brothers, right? It was H. Rap Brown who told the people to have a people's tribunal. H. Rap Brown told them to do that. You know what I'm saying? So H. Rap Brown was the face of it. And he was going to different places. Giving suggestions of how the movement should flow in that particular area, which is the reason why, of course, Congress came up with the H. Rap Brown rule.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let this man travel and speak, because he's traveling, and he is, he's getting the troops together.
Spreading Drake-mania.
Yeah, man, exactly. Drake-mania, right? No, a matter of fact, the Fugitive Act that Maryland hit him with was the legal descendant of the Fugitive Slave Act.
There you go.
Right? And so it culminated in the H. Rap Brown rule. And they used that law on brothers in the American Indian movement. They used it on the Black Panthers. They used it on some of the white students, the white youth getting busy. They used the H. Rap Brown law. Right? This man was on the top 10 FBI most wanted list. Right? This was the face of the resistance. H. Rap Brown was the face of the resistance. Now, this face of the resistance becomes a Muslim.
Right.
Before the advent of the Islamic revival, I think the Islamic revival can be traced back to the revolution in Iran. There were some aspects of it brewing before that, but it really culminated in the revolution in Iran. So by the time the Islamic revival takes off, H. Rap Brown has become a Muslim. Are you kidding me? You know what I'm saying? With contacts in the Black nationalist community, contacts in the white left, contacts with labor, contacts, and he's a Muslim now. You know what I'm saying? And so he becomes like the symbol of the Black liberation movement, particularly the most militant aspects of the Black liberation movement coming to Islam. He becomes a symbol of that. I mean, look how the government has to be looking at this, man. You know what I'm saying? And so this is a major figure here. This is a major figure. He was involved in many important aspects of the movement. I remember we took over the student government at San Francisco State, and I became president, all that kind of stuff. And so I remember it was controversial. The university was against it, all that. One day, a brother came to my office. He says, "Are you your so-and-so?" Yes, yes, sir. Can I talk to you for a second? I said, "Sure." So we sat down. He said, this brother said to me, he said, "I've been watching in the shadows what's been going on here. And I've been watching the kind of things that they're doing, saying about you, trying to do to you." He said, "I just want you to know that I am in the shadows and I got your back." He said, "I did security for H. Rap Brown back in the day." He said, "And I'm just letting you know, boom, 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 boom," right? That brother left. I never saw him again. I never saw him again. But he said, "I did security for H. Rap Brown. That was my involvement in the struggle. I was his security." You know what I'm saying? So H. Rap Brown, this was a major figure. And I think people lost touch because the name wasn't current anymore, right? That it was Jamil El Amin. So many people, you may have come across, "Oh, really? I thought he was dead," right? Because the name was gone, right? Name recognition was gone. So so if people know that his history is H. Rap Brown, they'll understand why he's in the place that he's in today. You know what I'm saying? That this is major stuff. And as you brothers know, we always have to make sure that Islam and the Black liberation struggle are not disconnected. We always have to make sure of that they are not disconnected. And Imam Jamil, when he becomes Imam Jamil, it was an illustration that Islam and the Black liberation struggle are not to be separated. He represents that. So H. Rap Brown was a major figure, a major figure.
That you're talking about, are there any specific books you could mention to our viewers that they could study in more detail some of the stuff you were talking about?
I think this new generation should familiarize themselves with the two most significant youth movements of that period, SNCC and the Black Panther Party. Really read about them. As I said, in Struggle, Claiborne Carson, I haven't seen anything that rivals that. The Black Panthers, Survival Pending Revolution by Paul Alkebulan is very critical. I also think that Black Against Empire is a must read because it has things in there that many of us who read books on the Panthers didn't know about in terms of the Panthers' influence, how influential the Black Panther Party was in the Bay Area, in California, in the United States, and in the world. How influential they were. So I think there should be a willingness to study the significance of the two most significant youth groups in that period of time. I think that's a really good place to start, inshallah. And I think Die Nigga Die is very, very critical. What Stokely and H-Rap and Bobby and Huey gave us in terms of an analysis of struggle is extremely, extremely important. Extremely important. You know how when H-Rap Brown said there are movements and there are struggle, like there's the Black liberation struggle, and in the struggle there are movements. That's a very, very important analysis. Movements come and go, but the struggle continues. That's a very critical analysis. Civil rights movement, anti-slavery movement, right? That's a very, very critical analysis. But the struggle continues. The struggle is the general. Movements are particular, right? And so the analysis that they gave with respect to the nature of struggle is extremely, extremely critical. And I think these books will do that. I remember Huey saying something like making a statement about the nature of God, that God has to be both male and female. Now we know that God does not have a sex, but he's on to something, meaning that, just as an example, in one point, Allah will refer to him as he is Allah, da 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 da. So obviously he's presenting himself with an attribute that's most associated with males. Then he'll say, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. I am Rahman and Rahim, right? Compassionate and merciful. Rahman and Rahim come from a word that means womb. Womb. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is presenting himself with the attributes of Rahman and Rahim, those are attributes more associated with the female, right? So even though Allah, of course, doesn't have a sex, when Huey said God must be male and female, he was saying it from a secular perspective, of course, but he was onto something. The analysis that these brothers had in terms of struggle, the nature of struggle, the nature of this system is extremely, extremely critical. They're extremely critical. And I think that the Black Panthers, more than anyone else, had the best understanding of the political philosophy of Malcolm than anyone had. They even had some of his subtle tendencies, subtle aspects of his political philosophy, even though they were seculars. And so I think that those two youth groups of that period must be studied, because they were that critical. And one of the ways you can see that they were that critical, that every time they're dealt with in the media, in Hollywood, they're always dealt with negatively, right? In Selma, Snick is dealt with negatively. In Selma, Snick is dealt with negatively. In the other movies, Panthers, they're dealt with negatively, right? And there's a reason for that, because in my mind, these were the most two significant youth groups in that period.
Yes, true.
I think, if I may,
Yes, please.
I think it's interesting too, when you look at the things that the state usually decides to attack, it's things and tactics that are relatively successful. So like you'll see that they said like 233 operations out of the 295 COINTELPRO operations that were released were directed towards the Black.
Yes.
So you also see that with the H-Rap Brown Act or law, you know, it's clearly afraid of this brother mobilizing from community to community where the conditions are already ripe for these incidents that turned into rebellions or whatever. But the state directly utilized the issue of what they felt like was most threatening to it to turn it around to go against. So like the Black Panther Party is labeled as the greatest internal threat to security of the United States, when in reality they're feeding 10,000 hungry children across the nation each day. So they're providing security to the end. You know, you can put it in that way, but the way that they're framed, is something negative because that's what the state wants to attack. So
Yes.
Rat Brown laws, we saw that he was labeled as an outside agitator.
But and if I could pause you there, but that is threatening. That is threatening because when we look at the history of the Spanish Inquisition, one of the things that was most threatening to the monarchy, to the church, and the noble blood was the fact that the Muslims were teaching people to read and write.
Mm-hmm.
They were paying people to translate books.
Mm-hmm.
They were creating public baths. They were doing these public services that were actually empowering the peasantry.
Yeah.
And that actually was very threatening to the oppressive powers because it starts to remove their power in the minds and in the hearts of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
People start to see that they're not the end of everything, that they're not supreme, that they're not in control of everything, and
Right.
there's other ways to do things.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
For sure, and I definitely agree with that. What I'm trying to point out in particular with this is how the state will go against what they claim to be representing, right? In order to stop what you're saying, the very threat of these people, basically pulling their card, exposing that this whole thing is a sham. So with the idea of the fact that they classified the Black Panthers as this, even though they were of more benefit to the community than the government itself. And the fact that, H. Rat Brown was organizing communities and inspiring them to stand up for themselves goes against what they were claiming he was doing, which was, harming the country when in fact, for the country, but what they claim to be, it's actually doing more good than what they were doing. And he was labeled, this is the main point I wanted to bring, that he was labeled as an outside agitator, right? And the fact that the state uses these labels to demean and demonize people, whatever is effective in the eyes of the masses. So you see that clearly today, the fact that rebellions popped off during certain demonstrations and responses to what's going on. You see the state and like the neo-colonial puppets from within the colony basically labeling these acts as like condemning them, right? Not necessarily saying here's a better method, but just condemning, right? And so this clearly is a tactic we see that happens when the state and the people that work for them are afraid that something's working, right? So I just wanted to point that out. Imam Jamil demonized with this same exact thing that's happening, that people are getting demonized with now as the resistance.
And something that's really interesting to me about that too, thinking about that aspect of those survival programs and thinking about what he was doing in Atlanta, right? What you're talking about is providing people a transitional space, right? So if you think about people in a state of dysfunction, like for instance, a alcoholic or a drug addict or some other type of social dysfunction, right? Typically, in order to treat that dysfunction, it's recommended for them to have some type of transitional space. They can go into where they're not expected to be fully recovered, but they're able to start making changes to how they do things, how they think and operate on the way towards being a more productive, responsible contributor to society. If you think about survival programs, and if you think about what he was doing in Atlanta, he's providing, and they were providing this transitional space for people to start making the journey out of that dysfunctional state of being
Yes. And coupling that with, because the brothers and sisters who were struggling in that phase of the struggle, the so-called 60s, early 70s, they had certain philosophies related to change, social change. And there are different philosophies related to social change. How does social change come about? And when H. Rap Brown transitions to Islam, he's basically adopting a philosophy of social change that's rooted in Islam and rooted in spirituality. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what we're all talking about, right? We all want to see change, and this is one of the reasons why the Sirah has to be thoroughly studied, because the Sirah represents a lot of things, and one of the things the Sirah represents is a philosophy of social change, because this thing started as in a cave, Iqra, and culminated in the establishment of a government 23 years later. So in between that time was social change was taking place. And so we have to really analyze that, and dissect it. The social change that started taking place from Iqra in the cave to the establishment of an Islamic government. And H. Rap Brown was basically saying, I now believe in a theory of social change that's rooted in spirituality. I believe in a theory of social change rooted in Iman, rooted in faith. I believe in a theory of social change that is Islam. Therefore, revolution by the book, right? Revolution according to the Quran, right? Social change according to the Quran. Now remember, as H. Rap Brown, he had all these different ideas regarding social change. All these different ideas regarding social change. Social change has happened in this way. Social change has happened in that way. Then he says, no, social change should happen in accordance with what God says, with what Allah says, right? And the way towards social change has to be rooted in the Sunnah. You know what I'm saying? The way that the prophets in general did it, and the way that the Prophet Muhammad in particular did it. You know what I'm saying? So now the Sirah becomes extremely, extremely critical, because it is a manual on social change. So imagine the government seeing this man now taking this position and using the word Messiah, right? And so yeah. So it's understandable from their perspective why he would be where he is today.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, unfortunately has somewhat kind of been they make the effort to separate that away from movement now, where
Yes.
you got all these people that are out in the streets and you have all this activity and all this stuff going on, but within it there's very little traces of growth and development for the person.
Yes.
There's not the kind of it's not the kind of culture of sort of saying, let me become more intelligent, let me become more gather more skills, let me develop myself, let me get away from my dysfunction and grow and overcome these things that when we look in the past, you see that so many people were making these huge cultural shifts. I mean, even if they weren't becoming Muslim, they were shifting away away from the way that the society is conditioning people to function.
Right.
And, it's so crucial and so fundamental that we have that tradition within our struggles of transitioning and of saying, we're going to become, we're going to transform our environment, we're going to transform ourselves, and we're going to become the kind of people that can actually accomplish a revolution.
Yes. Yeah, and and Allah says in the Quran, truly you shall move from stage to stage. Truly you shall move from stage to stage. And that's all a part of that. And so yes, becoming a better person. You know what I'm saying? And really looking at becoming a better person. And I think one of the major areas is the whole aspect of God consciousness. When you're God conscious, you're morally conscious. God consciousness produces moral consciousness. And so when you're not God conscious, you're not morally conscious.
Mhm.
So even if you're out there struggling for justice and so on and so forth, if you're doing it without God consciousness, then you're going to be waging this struggle without a moral consciousness. And this enemy has no moral conscience. This enemy does not want God consciousness, and he doesn't want moral consciousness. Because when the people don't have God consciousness, they don't have moral consciousness. If they don't have moral consciousness, they become corrupt. Once they become corrupt, then they'll produce corrupt leaders.
Yeah.
And so it really comes down to God consciousness. And so them doing what they're doing, alhamdulillah, all praise to Allah. But just like us, we didn't have it either. We didn't have it either. And by the grace of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought us to him. You know what I'm saying? So now there's other brothers and sisters out there who did the same thing that we did. And so we have to, with compassion, with mercy, with humility, help them to come to the true revolution, the revolution by the book. You know,
Inshallah.
inshallah.
So we have some questions that we got from some of our audience that we've been needing to get to, inshallah. And Tanzeen's going to be going through some of these for us.
Inshallah.
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 If that's all right with you, my brother.
Yeah, inshallah. So these were emailed to us.
Mhm.
I'll try to answer them. And
I can ask them to you if you want.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, yeah.
So
Long stuff. It's also comments plus question, I guess.
okay, so this part is part of the question right here?
Yes, that's
The whole thing.
Yeah, that's the
Okay,
whole
cool.
question.
Thinking about Sophia Bukhari's statement of people wanting her to decide on either being secularly black or apolitically Muslim, she said she accepted neither of those pressures.
Mhm.
In the struggle against anti-blackness, does or how can the existence of the Ummah and the call to fight against oppression and injustice wherever they may be found engage the theoretical impossibility of solidarity that Wooderson discusses? Wooderson does write about solidarity as provisional tactical, i.e. being solidarity with a sharp awareness of its limitations that eventually you will have to fight those you at one point are in solidarity with, although we have seen whites be militant, be arrested, and die in the line of fire recently. However, how do we make sure that we can parse individual acts against whiteness from collective whites or from collective whites?
I can try. So should I repeat it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, go for
So,
it, man.
yeah, I mean, the
I'm
question.
formulating some little thoughts here too. So.
Okay. So the question actually is about the series, and even before that we started this webinar series, there was a conversation with Frank Wooderson, who is a very important theorist. Kind of part of the world in which all other people can have solidarity, or when they have solidarity, it's at the expense of Black people. So it actually has this structure of social death while other people engage and experience psychic solidarity. So that's what the question is. So the question then is, how do you work together, or how do you have solidarity? And I think that's a very important question. And I will try to answer it my way, which is that at least because we're trying to think about also the Islamic movement and Islamic history of struggle, particularly because we refer to people like Sayyid Qutb and others like Hassan al-Banna and other thinkers that are Abdullah Azim and others throughout our different webinar conversations.
let me just throw
Yeah, go
something
ahead, go
in
ahead.
too before he continues.
Yeah, go ahead.
That one should always understand that we're speaking from a fixed perspective. And what I mean by that is we don't really deal with things in an abstraction. So we may deal with some theories and philosophical concepts in terms of as a group and in terms of the content that we're working on. We're coming from our perspective,
Sure.
which is Islamic struggle, Black liberation struggle, and that's where we're going to answer from always, no matter what the question is. And so I think it should be understood that anything solidarity related or anything that's relational we're going to deal with it from our position.
No, that's very helpful. So do you mind if I engage with that?
No, I just wanted to say that because
no, that's helpful for me.
Because you have to put it in context, because solidarity from one perspective to the next may be very different. And so
that's correct.
When we answer these questions, I just hope everyone understands that we're not answering in an absolute sense, that that we're answering from our perspective and making the effort to be consistent with our tradition of
That's
Islam.
right. That's right. So here's the thing. As far as the Islamic movement goes, in the Quran, there is very clear articulation of working with non-Muslims and what kinds of non-Muslims to work with. So that is kind of how Sayyid Qutb also talks about it, that there's non-Muslims who are going to do things even though they don't have belief. They may be doing the kind of work that helps broadly Muslims or the work of Islam, like the Project of Islam or Islamic governance in the future or Islamic resistance and so on. So those are non-Muslims that the Islamic movement folks usually are open to working with. And there's non-Muslims who are neutral, and we're open to dealing with them as well. And then there's the other kind who's actually foundationally against Islam. So we cannot work with them and we fight against them. That's sort of like a basic articulation from the Quran. Now, in terms of solidarity, there is a leftist, the word comes as a leftist history, a liberal leftist history. And it is actually, in many ways, if we're careful, it is not the way that Islamic movement thinks about collaborative work or working in conjunction with, because solidarity assumes the sovereign subject, the autonomous subject who's not obedient to something larger than himself. So that is based on, so when people say, what is the solidarity based on? They're going to talk about some other thing, which is about either collective autonomy or autonomy of individuals. And because the Islamic movement is based on obedience to Allah, and therefore the subject is obedient to a larger power, which is not obedient to other things in the world, there is in fact, and this is even my experience of working with various ultra radical groups that are Marxists or anarchists and so on, and their concepts of autonomy, their concepts of agency, their understanding of solidarity have not really helped me understand my tradition. So
and let me jump in there too, with respect to solidarity. For some, I think for some on the left, solidarity is a goal in and of itself.
Right.
The homogenization of people under a rubric of a sort of neoliberal multiculturalism. Right. And that becomes the standard. The sort of the rules of engagement and etiquette in the university becomes acceptable, unacceptable standards and rubric of solidarity and unity, and that becomes like a goal in and of itself, is to discipline everybody within the confines or within the borders of what's generally accepted under multiculturalism, and then that's considered as solidarity and a goal in and of itself.
Right.
We as Muslims, however, have something much higher above that, which is the mission. We have the mission, and so solidarity may become very beneficial. It may be tactical, et cetera, with other groups, non-Muslims, et cetera. But it's beneficial or non-beneficial as measured and judged against the mission.
Mhm.
right? So we don't subscribe to unity for the sake of unity, or what some people call uncritical unity.
Mhm.
We don't subscribe to that. Solidarity must be in relation to the mission and the goals that we're trying to achieve. And so we're able to be in solidarity when we're able to work together on projects that are consistent with our mission and our goals. You know what I mean? And so, and I think that's very important. And you know, I think the conversation that AfroPest goes into with that is, you know, this sort of academic tradition where
Yeah.
a lot of people are, you know, debating about what's politically correct, what's the correct culture that's considered not oppressive or that's considered not aiding the oppressor, etc. And I think that for the most part, you're talking about, you know, individuals who are not operating from a foundational set of principles, but are dealing with subjective principles that are defined by solidarity, multiculturalism, diversity, quotas, etc. That begins to define the underlying principles. But for the revolutionary, you're going to be driven already by a set of principles and values that already brings you to the conversation about solidarity. And so we're going to approach it very differently. And I think that what's happening in the universities around that conversation and what Afro-pessimism is critiquing is this kind of this idea that people can be in solidarity with slaves and people can be in unity with slaves while never disrupting the order of slavery. The idea that you can be in harmony with someone while you benefit from their subjugation. The idea that you can be at peace with someone while your stable lifestyle is something that they're slaving for. And or something that their pain and suffering is producing your stability. And so that, I think, is what I feel a lot of people are talking about when they have the conversation around solidarity. This is my own perspective, right? Like when I see academics have this conversation about solidarity, etc., I think what it is people seeking harmony and seeking like a non-antagonistic safe space away from the conflict without actually disrupting the order of things. And so it's like, while we're in this state of dysfunction, and while injustice and oppression is the dominant order of the day, you can't, you know, and if you're coming, and if you're personally benefiting from that, if your lifestyle is privileged and comfortable and stable in direct benefit from that subjugation, you can't then say that you're in harmony with the people that is constantly destroying. So the one who comes in and gets a cheap house because of gentrification cannot say that they're in harmony with the one who gets put on the street because of gentrification, merely because they agree on sexual preferences, or they agree to be considerate about that, or they're inclusive about language preferences, and et cetera, et cetera. One is necessarily displacing the other. And so I think, you know, like, and I know I've interrupted.
No. You brought up
my interruption.
Hey,
but
happy to interrupt.
But the point, what I'm trying to get at, is that, you know, we're although we're not materialistic, we're spiritual. We're not materialistic, but we're very practically oriented. So when I look at questions like that, you know, my thinking is, first of all, let's put it in context. You know, what do they mean by solidarity, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that ultimately, people are in solidarity when they're throwing it all in for the cause of justice. I think,
that's right.
People are in solidarity when they're ready to sacrifice it. And if you talk to people like Wilderson, and if you look deeper at where some of the analysis comes from, like if you look into Fanon, if you look into the stuff they're reading like Lacan, and if you look into stuff like Hegel, etc., they all have this as a core fundamental aspect of subjectivity or personhood is the confrontation to the death. They all have a core feature, which is to say that in any one of those frameworks of thinking, one must be willing to sacrifice their life to realize the full dignity of being a human being. And so ultimately, for me, that takes me back to Islam. So if we have to sacrifice our life for true justice or for true subject, and grappling with that question for a long time. And I think for me, it comes back to the master-slave confrontation. Whereas as long as you're not willing to die, you're not willing to confront. Right? So, and that goes back to worship, because the fear of death or the fear of the power this person has to hurt you, it's like deifying them. You know what I mean? It's like deifying the slave master. And so ultimately, in all of it, we're talking about our willingness to sacrifice our personal comfort, our willingness to bleed for justice, our willingness to be placed into compromised situations, our willingness to be treated like Imam Jamil, our willingness to share his plight, and to me, that's what I'm hearing when I hear questions about solidarity, etc.
Yeah.
It's about like an existential confrontation. Is it about this life? Is it the comforts of this life and this body? Or is there something bigger that I'm willing to throw this life away for?
Here's the thing to add to that. I guess it's, I'm trying to have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
Which is that, let's say there's white folks who really want to be in the kind of struggle that's helpful. Let's say they're not going to be Muslim. Let's say they're not going to be Muslim, and we can't determine that, and then they choose not to be. And so, there are some examples of that, right? We got people like David Gilbert. We got people like Marilyn Butt. We got examples like that where they want to give up their resources, their inheritance, etc., to a large extent in order to, be in certain degree of unity, let's say. And they're not interested in being like perpetrators. They're really kind of being careful for the most part. They're in conversation with the actual strugglers. So in that sense, I'm open to this, but it's not solidarity to me. It's something else, because we're not buying into the concept of sovereign people who are just, they don't need God. So they're just sovereign by themselves.
That's right.
I think that's what we're critiquing. And I think the question is very good in the sense that it is actually taking that idea and saying, hey, then how does it work?
Yeah.
And I think, so I think we kind of engaged with the question. Is there anything else you want to deal with today? I think the second question is a long one. We can go through. So by the way, please do email us more questions. I know we didn't go through all the questions. We are going to, as we move through our series, we do have a limited time today. The second question, I actually really like the last question. And I think that's something that, our generation of people in struggle, we really have to grapple with the question of theory, because we're dealing with an era where there's so many people that are so highly theoretical. I forgot one thing. Sorry. One huge risk for Muslims who are serious about their values, taking solidarity too lightly, is that, and this is my experience, is that the left solidarity comes with their own expectations.
Yes, sir.
So in order to have solidarity, you often have to give up your normative values. Let's say for Muslims, normative values of gender. We believe in very specific things that are completely defined by the Sharia. Divinely determined. So if that's our faith, often we're disrespected and we have to adjust to what they're saying we have to do in order to have solidarity.
Right.
So there's no solidarity when it comes to losing Islamic values. We have a lot of Islamic viewership. So that's something we want to be very clear about, that we don't have hatred towards individuals, but we do love what Allah loves and do not love what Allah doesn't love in terms of actions and things like that. So when it comes to moral values, normative ethics in relation to gender, those are Islamic normativity, which is based on divine law. And so we adhere to that. As long as that is respected, there's room for engagement and interaction. But at the university level, this is always the last concern, that they always talk about how Muslims are being maybe too, I don't know, like conservative values and so on. Yeah. And then they don't have the understanding or openness to really consider what Islam teaches us and why we have to follow what it teaches. And so there is definitely a risk to solidarity, which is uncritical and too unconditional. It has to be conditional and, like the question says, provisional and tactical for us. We have to understand also that the state, as it's orchestrating a war on terror, that all kinds of people are engaged in war on terror against Muslims. It includes not just straight whites, it includes queer whites, it includes bisexual whites, it includes bisexual Americans. Like, for example, when Muslims are tortured in Guantanamo and other areas, they were using actually alternative gender theory to psychologically torture Muslim men. That was actually happening. So we cannot just be open to whatever and not take seriously the fact that there is a very specific war on Islam, and it also means war on Islam's normative ethics. And so there's going to be all kinds of promotion and propaganda towards Muslims, and then conservative Muslim men who are militant are going to be attacked on the basis of postmodern theories of gender. And we do have to be very, very serious and clear about that. So that's all I have to say for this particular question. Yeah. And I think we can answer the other questions in the next episode, inshallah.
Yeah, and I mean, I just want to, and I hate to beat a dead horse, but I think, you know, to me, that's a very important question, because, excuse me, we have to really examine our own, we have to examine our own perspective on that. And, you know, solidarity is not a state. It's not like a location and you get there and you mark checked in on your phone. You know what I mean? It's not like a thing that you just achieve by agreeing, you know, by agreeing to agree. I agree to agree with you, no matter how much I don't understand or how much it alienates me. I agree to agree. And thus we have arrived at solidarity. Now, like, solidarity in struggle, that's what people miss out on, is that solidarity is in struggle. If it's not in struggle, then there's really no context. And when we think about the struggle and we think historically about the people who you know, who had the and we look at the prisoners of war, people don't extend the courtesy of solidarity to them. They don't want to be in solidarity with them. They want to be in solidarity with people who sit in leisure and comfort, you know, and that's a problem. You know what I mean? And so, you know, there's a lot of it that we really got to struggle with and think about, you know, and you know, we should be aspiring towards those people who really struggle, and not just trying to be a part of the cool kids club or be a part of the herd. You know, unity is very important in terms of struggle, but it's unity and struggle, it's solidarity and struggle, right? So people who are totally removed from struggle, who are not engaged in struggle, who are not making the effort, who are not making the sacrifices, who are not invested in it, who don't have a stake in it, they should not be the ones to determine for us what solidarity is. And when we examine it today, if we look at the culture today, we'll see that it's coming from the corporate model of diversity. It's coming from the corporate model of diversity, which is being implemented in universities. And so it's being defined by these universities. And these are the same universities who were started, their seed money came from slavery. So we can never.
Settling on native.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And genocides and holding the remains of native people hostage, etc. And get involved with struggles and try to steer it towards what their comfort zone is, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we approach the question of solidarity and when we think about Afro-pessimism, etc., we can't ignore the elephant in the room. So inshallah.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, please do.
Yeah,
Please do.
man,
I know we're
please.
running low on time, but
Yeah.
I'm not as versed and studied in Afro-pessimism as my brothers here, but I do know in regards to solidarity, one thing that I've always tried to pay attention to, and I think it's even especially more since I became a Muslim, is like, you know, you can't see what's in somebody's head or read their mind, but their actions will tell you their intention,
Mm-hmm.
right? So usually, like, even prior to becoming a Muslim, like say like white secular leftists would approach, you know, an organization I'm a part of or a group I'm working with in regards to wanting to help. My question be not necessarily in these words, but I would try to figure out, well, how committed are you to dismantling white supremacy within your own community?
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, that would dictate that you really want to help. But if you want to wash your hands of your white guilt, you'll come around and you'll learn our, you know, colloquial phrases,
Right.
and
Yeah.
you'll learn our mannerisms, and you'll be the bayest white boy around,
Right.
that, or whatever. So you so much so you feel comfortable saying, you know, the N-word freely.
And you'll get paid $5,000 to write an article about us.
Right. And so if you look at people's the actions that they're willing to take or the direction they're willing to take, it oftentimes suggests their intention. And if your intention is actual solidarity,
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like you'd be trying to be a part of the club or trying to get us to be a part of your club. You would actually do what the struggle requires.
Yeah.
Your position and your position, your socioeconomic and cultural and religious position would allow you to do in benefit of the struggle, as opposed to what makes you most comfortable, what's the easiest route to get over what you're having internal conflict about, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a good way to analyze what is actual solidarity, or, you know, what kind of solidarity we should be looking for.
One of the best ways, speaking of solidarity, one of the best ways that solidarity works is when inheritance money is transferred
Yeah.
to important projects. So we have a fundraiser that's going to be live. Again, we had some processor issues, and that was the capitalist bureaucracy. And we just now, in the next tomorrow or today, we're going to put up our fundraisers again. You know, the best way to support things is not just us, we're not just selfish, you know, other things like this that are doing the kind of work that is trying to involve the community and trying to fight against white supremacy and the war on terror and things like that. So one of the best ways, I think, really, honestly, is to, you know, deal with wealth, and I know I joke about this sometimes, but this is truly important, that actually some of the 60s, you know, white radicals who were real, they were doing some of that. A lot of them who weren't even talking much, they were actually taking some of the parents' wealth away and sending it to different organizations that were doing very serious work, because money is required in order to do some of that work, you know, the practical level. So that's just one thing I wanted to say. Amir, if you want to give your perspective before we end, that would be. Because I think there's a.
You're talking about the question of solidarity?
No, I was wondering if you want to. We're going to end with the last words from you. So if you want to just help us end this session on HRAP Brown and perspective,
any
closing thoughts, and so on.
Well, the last thing is that now we now begin to think about now the transition that once he was imprisoned, brothers from the Dar al-Islam movement were coming into prison and invited him to Juma. And that's where the transition begins, right? And so we'll just stop there, inshallah, and then begin there next time, inshallah.
I'm excited about that part.
Alhamdulillah.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Alhamdulillah, it's an honor. It was an honor to be here. Really an honor to be here. Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair for the work that you brothers are doing, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
So
inshallah, viewers, we're going to come back next weekend again with Imam Jamil Al-Amin, and which is the part 2 of this session.
That is a conversation about Imam Jamil Al-Amin.
Yeah.
we're not going to have him on the program, but we're going to be talking about it, inshallah.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.